Hey, welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Welcome to the Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman, the show where a cranky middle-aged sports writer, that's me, who has seen it all, takes you behind the scenes and into the stories. I am your host, Jeff Pearlman. Today's story is a weird one because it's about someone I feel like everyone should know, but in a way nobody knows. And it's a guy named Taj Red McDavid, a really, really good high school basketball player who did something profoundly ambitious, profoundly understandable considering his age, and I guess also profoundly dumb. And that's what I'm going to dive into today. If you're a basketball fan at all, even if you're a young basketball fan, you probably know about the 1996 NBA draft. For my money, it's probably the best draft in the history of the NBA. You're talking about a draft where Allen Iverson went first, and among the players who came after were Stephon Marbury, Ray Allen, this is in no order, Kerry Kittles, Steve Nash, Antoine Walker, Kobe Bryant. It was just this buffet, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, of great, great players. Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer. In other words, find me a draft where Allen Iverson is not the best player and you have a hell of a draft. And 1996 was an interesting time because 1 year earlier in the 95 draft, a kid named Kevin Garnett went straight from high school to the NBA, and he was the number 5 pick in the 95 draft by the Minnesota Timberwolves. And Garnett was the first high schooler to come out in 2 decades. And it was now a new thing. High schoolers were going to come out. So the 1996 draft included 2 high schoolers who many suspected would be drafted in the first round. One was a kid named Kobe Bryant, who you've probably heard of. Another was a kid named Jermaine O'Neal, who you probably heard of. Kobe Bryant out of Pennsylvania, Jermaine O'Neal out of South Carolina. And they both had NBA measurables. Kobe was explosive. People were comparing him in a way to a young Jordan. He had allegedly lit up Jerry Stackhouse in some summer experiences. Kobe Bryant was a guy who was going to be drafted high. Jermaine O'Neal, 6'10", projected to a really good NBA power forward, was going to be the guy. And the NBA draft happens, and everyone is wondering what's going to happen. And ultimately, Kobe Bryant is selected by the Hornets and traded to the Lakers. Jermaine O'Neal is selected a little later by the Portland Trail Blazers. And both those guys go on to have these really profound, great, impactful NBA careers, resulting in one of them, Kobe Bryant, being in the Hall of Fame. There was, however, a third high school player who entered the draft. And he was a guy who made one of maybe the dumbest, most quizzical mistakes in NBA history. He was a kid out of a tiny town, Wilmington, South Carolina. He lived in a mobile home with his mom and different family members. He was a 6'6" forward at Palmetto High School. And his senior year, he was really good. He averaged 26 points a game, 12 rebounds, 2.4 blocks, and he's a Class AA Player of the Year in the state of South Carolina. And his name is Taj Red McDavid, and he's called Red because he had a reddish tint to his hair when he was born, and he had this nickname, Red. And Red McDavid got caught up in something that happened at the time. It was NBA fever for young players. And it was weird because I remember at the time I was writing for the Nashville Tennessean newspaper, and I remember every now and then sports sections would post lists of all the people declaring themselves early for the NBA draft. And there would be a lot of guys from schools that they had no shot, like a guy from Drake or a guy from Delaware State, early NBA draft. And you'd have high school players. And it was Kobe, it was Jermaine O'Neal, it was Taj McDavid. And everyone's like, who the fuck is Taj McDavid? Who the fuck is Taj McDavid? And in the lead up to the draft, you start hearing people ask these questions, journalists ask these questions, calling, reaching out to scouts. And all the scouts are like, I don't know who this guy is. And I actually found a story that ran in the hometown paper in Wilmington, South Carolina, where someone interviewed Taj and his mother heading into the draft. And Taj McDavid's mother said, and I quote, "My son can be another Michael Jordan." And I don't know if Taj McDavid believed it or not, but when he was asked, he said, "I'm ready for the NBA. My talents are ready for the NBA. I want to go straight to the NBA. I'm going to go there, I'm going to kick ass, and I'm going to dominate." Well, The NBA draft happens. And again, Kobe goes high, Jermaine O'Neal goes high, Taj McDavid goes undrafted and forgotten. He's ridiculed for a day or two, and then nobody thinks of him again. But I'm like, Taj McDavid, like what is the story here? What is the story about Taj McDavid? And I just decide I really want to find out. I'm fascinated by Taj McDavid, and I really want to get to the bottom of who this kid is. And I decide to do it. So in the fall of 1996, I am a young writer for the Nashville Tennessean, working on my career. And they have no interest in the story on Taj McDavid. I pitched a sports section. What about this kid? Blah, blah, blah. And sports editor's like, no. Well, I pitched the story to a newspaper at the time called the Newark Star-Ledger, Newark, New Jersey. And I was like, would you let me do a freelance piece about this kid, Taj McDavid, the mystery of Taj McDavid? And the editor, a guy named Kevin Whitmer, says, yeah, go for it. Do it. Can I travel? No, you can't travel, but you can call. So I actually get Taj McDavid on the phone, and I get his family on the phone. And when I call Taj McDavid, literally when I call him, he answers the phone, and he's in his family's mobile home, and he's sitting on the couch. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm eating chips. And I was like, what else are you doing? And he's like, I'm eating chips and I'm watching TV. And I was kind of like, what else are you doing? He's like, well, I guess I'm waiting for the NBA to call. And this was less than half a year after the draft. And he's on his couch and he's waiting for the NBA to call. And the NBA is not calling. I remember I interviewed Jerry West, who at the time was the general manager of the Lakers. And I said, Taj McDavid. And he's like, I only know who that is because when someone enters the draft, we have to look. He's like, it makes me sick how bad advice these kids are getting. I called another executive. He's like, that guy had no NBA game to speak of. And it's like, this kid decided on his own to enter the NBA draft. His family encouraged him to do it. And now he didn't know what the fuck to do with his life. And he tried enrolling at a local community college and playing basketball there. And he lasted for a week. He had other colleges that were kind of interested, but not really. He wanted to go to a Division I school, but once you applied and surrendered your eligibility for the NBA draft, if you didn't bring it back before the draft, you couldn't do it. So he could not do it. And he's sitting at home, and I called him and talked to him. And it was probably it's definitely one of the saddest interviews I've ever done, because it's this kid who genuinely believed he was going to the NBA. It's funny because I interviewed his high school coach, and he was like, I tried telling Taj, you are not going to the NBA. And Taj was like, no, I can play there. You're not going to the NBA. You have no shot of making the NBA. And I talked to a scout who came to a gym where Taj was playing. And he's like, I pulled this kid aside and I told him, you have no chance of making this league. You will not be drafted. And Taj McDavid was like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And what happened, it turns out, is Taj McDavid did something you should never do. He listened to his uncle. And I had a lovely uncle named Uncle Marty, but I probably wouldn't have taken journalism advice from Uncle Marty or athletic advice from Uncle Marty. And Taj McDavid had an uncle who he was very close to. And it turns out Taj was struggling with his scores to get into a Division I school. Now he could have gone JUCO, right? He could have gone NAIA, played a couple years, hopefully gone on. But he didn't have the scores. And his uncle was basically like, fuck that, go to the NBA. Go to the NBA. The other thing that's interesting is he wasn't being recruited by Division I schools. In a lot of ways, Taj McDavid was the victim of this thing that goes on in college basketball, which is the letters. And if you are even on the radar of a school, if you are even on the tiny radar of a school, if you are a guy averaging 15.8 points per game for your high school in Anchorage, Alaska, you'll probably get Division I letters. You'll get letters from New Hampshire and Drexel and Delaware and Vermont. You'll get letters from these schools saying, dear blank. And you literally are a blank. You are name filled in by a computer, by a database. We are impressed by your thing and you are on our radar, just so you know, blah, 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 sincerely. And these schools do this only so players feel wanted in case the school winds up being interested. And Taj McDavid, by virtue of averaging 26.1 points per game against other small schools with other small players, is getting these letters. So he's getting the letters from Auburn. He's getting the letters from South Carolina. And when I interviewed him, he literally said to me, well, Auburn was interested in me. South Carolina was interested in me. And when I called those schools, they were like, we don't know who the fuck he is. It was letters. It was just letters. And it really speaks in a lot of ways to the sinister, evil, overlording way that college sports have operated for years, is you convince these kids they're prospects, and you convince these kids are better than they are. And Taj McDavid, truly, at best, was a guy who should have been playing for Middle Tennessee State as a seventh man, right? He was a guy who goes to Yale and is a kind of contributor on an Ivy League level team. Like, that's who he was. But he got caught up in it all. He had an uncle saying, you're ready for the NBA draft. He didn't have the scores. And when I wrote the story on him for the New York Star Ledger, it was just depressing. And my lead to the story was, somewhere deep within the cranial activities of Taj Red McDavid, this all makes perfect sense. So what if he's sitting on his couch watching Oprah specials with a bag of Cool Ranch by his side? Nothing's permanent in the world of Taj, especially this. Soon enough, they'll call. Surely they will. An NBA squad out there wants the world's next great small forward off guard, a Scottie Pippen in disguise. The Knicks, perhaps, maybe the Nets. McDavid will wait all right, because the longer the delay, the greater the reward. That's his thinking, the logic that pieces everything in this strange little world of ours together. They will call, just wait. Any minute now, you'll see. Any minute. McDavid waits because, quite frankly, he doesn't know what else to do. And the sad way I left Taj McDavid in 1996, the last time I'd spoken to him for years, is this kid sitting on a couch, watching Oprah with his Cool Ranch Doritos, hoping for a shot. And a decade later, I decided to go back and see if I could find him. So it's 2014, and I'm a writer for Bleacher Report. And this was a time when Bleacher Report would actually spend money to send writers to different places. And I had an editor, a great guy named Bill. And one day I said to Bill, I was like, have you ever heard of Taj McDavid? And he's like, I don't know who that is. And I was like, in 1996, Taj McDavid was the third high schooler to declare early for the NBA draft after Kobe Bryant and Jermaine O'Neal. He never got drafted. He vanished into the abyss. I want to find him. And my editor was like, all right, how are you going to find him? And I was like, well, I have an address. I don't have a phone number. And I just want to fly down and give it a shot to Wilmington, South Carolina. And he's like, all right, give it a go. I fly to Wilmington, South Carolina. I've never been there before. It is rural, middle of nowhere, nothing to do, nothing. And I have this address for Taj Red McDavid. And it's a trailer, a mobile home, not a trailer, mobile home. And I go up, and there's a neighbor out in the yard, a woman, an older woman. And she sees me kind of looking around, and she goes, can I help you, honey? And I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for Taj McDavid. And she goes, the boy with the basketball, you have the right house. And I'm like, all right, cool, thanks. And I knock on the door, and this is one of those things, door knocking, very nervous. I knock on the door. It's a screen door. And a guy comes to the door, and he's an older guy wearing kind of like a tank top, a white tank top, black man. And he goes, can I help you? And I was like, this is totally random, but my name is Jeff Pearlman, and I'm a journalist, and I write about sports. And I was looking for a kid named Taj Red McDavid. And he goes, hold on one second. And he goes, Taj, get over here. And in front of me, standing there, is the ghost of Taj Red McDavid. And I've seen a lot of pictures of Taj, but I saw him all when he was 17, 18. And now he's a man. He's in his 30s. He has a piercing under his lip. He's a little heavy, but not fat, like just has something to him. Got a closely cropped haircut. And he goes, what's up? And I was like, hey, this is kind of random, but my name is Jeff Pearlman. I did a story about you years ago, and I write for Bleacher Report, and I've always been fascinated. And when you try to get people to talk to you, you talk real fast. You're like, and blah, 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 and I'm from New York, so I talk fast anyway with my hands. I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and I would love to do a story. And he just goes, all right, man, come on in. And he opens the screen door, and I go in this house, and it's the same place he was living when I interviewed him all those years earlier on the couch with Oprah and the Doritos. And he's like, what do you want to know? And I was like, I'm just fascinated by what happened to you. And he's like, well, I'll tell you. And he starts telling me the story. And he says he didn't have the grades. And he said he got really bad advice. He also said to me, I know I could have played in the NBA. He's like, I know I could have played in the NBA. I should have had a 10-year NBA career, which is delusional. Just being honest, very delusional. It's not true. But whatever. He's like, I know I can play in the NBA. And I'm like, well, what happened to you after this all went down? And he was like, basically, it sucked. He's like, I was 18 years old and I was getting mocked by everyone. And people are like, you're such a loser. Why would you do that? And he actually got a job working at a like shoe store. And I thought how ironic it was. He's literally selling basketball shoes, making minimum wage. And these are the shoes his heroes were wearing. And these are the shoes that Kobe was wearing and the shoes that Iverson were wearing, the guys in the draft class he wanted to be a part of. And he's working at the shoe store. And I'm sitting there in this mobile home unit in middle of nowhere, South Carolina, with this guy with the pierced under his lip, looking a little doughy. And you think this has all the hallmarks of a heartbreaking story, like all the hallmarks of a heartbreaking story. Break out the violins. Was he kicked out of his house? Was he addicted to drugs? Was he this? Was he that? Was he homeless for a while? Like all the hallmarks are there, right? These stories have been told a million times before. And it turns out he doesn't actually live there. His family lived there. He was visiting. I happened to knock on the right day. He lives in a house nearby. He's a father of a 5-year-old at that time. He had shared custody with his wife, who he got along with very well. After everything fell apart, after he worked at the shoe store, after his basketball dreams died, he decided he was going to become a paralegal. And he goes to school and he gets all the credentials for being a paralegal. And when I'm interviewing him, he's like, I'm doing great, man. I work as a paralegal. I have a beautiful daughter. I'm studying to become an investigator. Like, this is not a sad story at all. This is not a sad story at all. And it's so funny because sometimes as a journalist, you do have your journalism hat on and you assume you're walking into something. And in a way, it's one of the beauties of this job. You think you're walking into a sad story and it's a triumph. You think you're walking into a tragedy and it's uplifting. You think you're going to find someone you hate and you find someone you love. Like, it's a magical journey you're on. And all those years after first learning about Taj McDavid, all those years after interviewing him over the phone and thinking, what a pathetic sob story this is. How pathetic this is. This is the worst thing ever. I'm sitting in front of a guy, a proud father, a paralegal, a homeowner, a really smart, interesting man. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. This is great. And in a lot of ways, maybe this is the best way Taj McDavid's life could have gone. That is a wrap for this episode of Press Box Chronicles with Jeff Pearlman. Leave a comment below on what stories you'd like to hear more about, or if there's a particular sports figure you would like me to discuss. I'm all in on this. Please make sure you like and subscribe and follow me on TikTok at Jeff Pearlman Author, at Bluesky at Jeff Pearlman. Thank you so much for diving behind the scenes and digging into the story. We will see you next time on Press Box Chronicles.